So first and foremost, welcome to everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Janie Nolan, and I am the Executive Director of the American Avalanche Association. And we're really grateful to be here tonight and to have a really important and a really timely conversation with this panel. Before I introduce our moderator for this evening, I want to personally thank Jen Reddy, who is on your screen tonight. And Jen is really, she's been the brainchild behind this webinar, and she has made it happen. So Jen, thank you so much. We couldn't have done this without you, so thanks. And then I want to introduce our moderator for tonight. Many of you probably know him, but for those that don't, Dave Richards, or Grom, is the director of the Avalanche Program for Alta Ski Area. He's a longtime member of A3, a member of Wasatch Backcountry Rescue, and a former Avalanche dog handler. And in addition to that, Grom is also currently a student of psychology at the University of Utah, and he has done extensive research and public speaking on the topics of stress and emotional trauma in the outdoor industry. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Grom for the remainder of the discussion in the evening and let him introduce our panelists.
Thanks a lot, Jane. That's embarrassing. That makes me sound like a really, really important person. And let's all be honest, I'm just a lowly ski patroller when it comes down to it. So thanks everyone so much for being here. This is a really important topic in our industry. And I think it's something that for years and years and years, we didn't talk about. And in 2018, all of a sudden, the thing kind of boiled over, and we started talking about stress and mental health in the avalanche industry and what all of us go through. Before I ask our panelists to introduce themselves, I just kind of want to go through what I hope we can talk about today. And that's, what is stress and what are stress injuries, and how do they lead to stress traumas in our line of work? And does that affect our decision making? Is that decision stress? And are we still in a good place to make life or death decisions, literally, for a lot of people? And anecdotally, I want to discuss the tools that people can use to address stress in their workplace, in their lives, because it all compiles into one big thing, so that we can continue to move forward. And to what success can we do that? This is a short time period for this panel, and talking to all these people, I can guarantee you that we could spend 5.5 hours here instead of 1.5. So I'm gonna ask Lewis to introduce himself, followed by Liam, and then Kim, and maybe you guys can give us a brief rundown on who you are and how you can help us with this conversation today before we move forward. Lewis, have at it.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. So my name is Lewis Smurl. I'm a mental health practitioner here in Jackson, Wyoming. It's awesome to see all you guys, even though technology I can't, but yeah, we've got a good crew, almost 200 folks signing up, which is really cool. I feel super honored to be a part of this conversation as a mental health practitioner and someone that has my own mental health challenges that I've, a lifetime of overcoming. I'm passionate about it. And the good news is that there's so much potential. We don't have to be stuck in the old school way of thinking. So I'm excited for this conversation. So I work with first responders in Teton County, as well as the general population, been in community mental health, psychiatric emergency at the hospital. But the first responder work is, I think, what's kind of brought me here, because the work that you guys do, there's a really high risk for stress injuries. That doesn't have to be pessimistic. There's good news to be preventative there. But yeah, that's my role, is helping the first responders in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem stay mission ready, deal with the big hits, both the rapid loading critical incidents as well as the cumulative stress. And I love my job. I feel it's the best job ever to help folks stay in the game. Yeah, that's all.
Thanks a lot, Lewis. Liam, you've got on my notes here, it just says legend under your description. So maybe you can expand on that for a second.
Well, thanks, Crom. I began my avalanche career as a ski patroller in Squaw Valley in 1968. And I worked there as a patroller for 3 years. And then I migrated to Utah and got a job at Snowbird. That first winter it was open, and about 6 weeks after the resort's opening day, I became somehow the snow safety director at the resort. I worked there in that position for 27 years, and then kind of moved across the road. I ran the highway avalanche program for UDOT in Little Cottonwood Canyon for another 16 years. And I retired in 2014, and I currently live on Lake Pend Oreille in North Idaho. And I'm very honored to be a part of this gathering here.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Liam. Kim, our Canadian friend from the north, which means you obviously know more than the rest of us because we're screwing it up down here.
I was just going to ask what my word was if Liam's was legend, but mine's Canadian. I'll be the token Canadian on the panel. My name is Kim Vanette, and I'm a professional ski guide and professional skier out of Revelstoke, British Columbia, Canada. And so I am so honored to be here on this panel with these gentlemen. My history with mental health awareness and recovery sort of started early in my career, which is relatively short, but over the last 12 years, I've been involved in ski guiding in Canada. And early in my career, I had an incident that changed the trajectory of what I thought I was getting myself into. I started ski guiding as a means to help myself understand more about backcountry skiing. Took a lot of courses in the process, and like I said, early in my career, had an incident that caused me to end up doing a lot of therapy in my day, and that heightened my awareness on how I was reacting. My decision making was being affected by the incident that I was involved in, and certainly as someone that was new in my career at that point, didn't feel like there was a lot of space to reach out to, and didn't feel like a lot of the conversations that we were having in the industry were relevant to what I was experiencing. So in the last 7 years since that incident, I've been advocating for speaking more openly and more vulnerably about the experience that we've been through, and hoping to break down the stigma surrounding a lot of those what used to be perceived as negative events. Certainly not events we want to be involved in, but hopefully we can change the way that we look at them and learn from them.
I appreciate your work, Kim. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, let's start this conversation, I guess. And Lewis, I'd like to start with you. I've had a lot of experience with mental illness in my life. I'm bipolar. I have chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, and have been hospitalized on 2 occasions for mental health issues. And have spent a lot of time, working on this, but you're the professional. Talk to us about what is stress and how does it work, and what are the mental and physiological effects of what it is that we're here talking about? Give us a baseline on what we're actually discussing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll try to keep it brief, and then we can expand if we need to, mainly because I don't personally know how to answer that question on a short answer. But I think the first thing is stress is a crucial ingredient to our survival, to our decision-making, quick actions when there's a perceived threat or danger to respond and keep ourselves safe. I like to use a metaphor that our stress system, our sympathetic nervous system, is kind of like a guard dog. And my dog at home is kooky, but my dog Batman has my best interest in mind. Sometimes the stress system wants to protect us so much, it overrides even the handler or the owner's commands. What I'd like to talk about today is that there's basic kind of immediate stress. We drop something, someone cuts us off in traffic, whatever, we have a response. But I think what we're going to be exploring today is the load of chronic stress that I feel safe to say probably every single person is dealing with on some level. Maybe some are better at mitigating that, but this chronic stress is the crusher. And yeah, I think if it helps, some of you guys maybe know the hand model of the brain system. I like this. I think if things are geared to like a kindergartner, then maybe I can digest it and understand it, but I really like it. I like the visual. And it's pretty accurate to neurobiology. I'm sure there's a lot of folks way smarter than me that can explain it or correct it. So please let me know if I mess something up here. But the stress system, that crucial sympathetic nervous system that keeps us alive, starts with our brain. So the brain stem is kind of the wrist, and that is kind of basic life support, breathing, heartbeat. The part we're talking about is the amygdala, which I'm sure you've all heard of. That's kind of the thumb. This is the limbic system, the emotional system. That's really good at detecting threat. Folks that are under chronic stress, this is going to be larger. Folks that have undergone trauma, unfortunately, this can be larger. The good news is that we can mitigate it. But so the part that developed last, which is the most advanced, but also the most complex, like your internet in Little Conway Canyon, is the cortex, the prefrontal cortex. That's the decision making. So when everything is online, when we have all parts, the whole team working together, we're at our best functioning. What happens when there's a detection of threat is that amygdala, the guard dog, is like, whoa, what's that? And we literally pop our top. So we are losing blood flow to the crucial decision making, the fact-based executive functioning. And so when that happens, kind of all bets are off. And sadly, it takes a long time to get our functioning back online, to get the blood flow back in there. And so we can't think ourselves out of this, no matter how smart you are. You can't regulate, just like on a really cold day, I can't think my hands to be warm, right? No matter how much I'm like, come on, warm up. We actually have to do behavioral changes, concrete changes, shrug my shoulders, do some windmills, shake the blood flow back into our hands when we're cold. The same is true for when we pop our top, when our executive functioning goes offline. We need to get blood flow back into that system. And so we'll talk about ways to do that. The good news, I don't want to talk too much about that. The good news is how to get back into the parasympathetic, the calm, and that is happening to us all hundreds, thousands of times a day, this flip-flop. And so we're just trying to decrease how much those spikes are happening and have more of a middle ground. As a therapist, I'm a way better listener than talker. I'm going to stop there and check in to see where we're at. Yeah, okay. But that's the start.
Thank you. And one note here. Well, thank you very much. That's a really good. I like that. I wish someone had taught me that in a basic psych course. One thing I forgot here, and I'm being reminded on the comment, is for people in the audience, please submit questions in the Q&A tab, and we will address those towards the end. And in fact, somebody in the Q&A just said they really like your hand analogy, by the way. So good job. So, so Liam, with that in mind, you wrote in a book that I hope someday everybody gets to read about a day when you decided to leave Little Cottonwood Canyon, when it was just at the point where it was too much. And I want to ask, was that stress? How were you mentally at that point? And how did you deal with it to that point? And then really the big question is, how did you get the blood flow moving back, as Lewis was just talking about, to move forward? I mean, I'm sure you reached that point at other points in your career. What did you do to windmill your arms around to keep it going?
Well, you're certainly right. The decision to leave came, it seemed like it came rather suddenly during a kind of a stressful period that I realized was being repeated over and over and over again. And it's still being repeated there in Little Cottonwood Canyon, dealing with the road, which is certainly challenging. And I just decided at that particular moment, it was February 23rd, 2013 at night, about 9 o'clock at night, that I didn't want to do this anymore, that I acknowledged the fact that it was wearing me down, or that it had worn me down. And I think when I realized that, it was to use the term that's used overly or quite a bit, I felt liberated. I had come to a place I probably needed to arrive at, and it was, it was pretty free. I mean, I stayed there that winter and the next one, so I didn't leave immediately, but I realized that I had decided that the end was somewhere in sight, and that I could now choose the specific time when that was over, and when I guess the burden that I was carrying with myself would seem to start to go away.
How'd you move on into that next year? Because you obviously, I mean, you and I have talked about this a little bit privately, and I hope I don't share something too much here, but you've told me, at that point in your career, there was a night when you completely froze. And I was there on that rescue with you that night. And
yes, yeah.
And that stress that you were under, how did you continue to move on and continue to make good decisions and keep all of us here out of trouble for so long? I mean, was that the Ray Lindquist quote, just reading over and over in your head, or?
That particular night you're talking about happened about 1 year earlier, and that was it was a situation where a couple of bad things happened that should have really been expected, but I was not expecting them. I was wishing that they wouldn't happen, and they eventually did. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but it could have been a real disaster. And during the rescue, I felt so much guilt and self-recrimination for the first 5 or 10 minutes that I was just kind of walking, through the motions, but I really wasn't doing a good job. And people like yourself and some others kind of took over and got us in the right direction. And then I think I, slammed my hand in the car door and realized that, all was not lost, and, kind of got back on the horse. I think making mistakes in my career was certainly not anything new to me. And I guess, I don't know. So they would happen, and as long, and sometimes they were bad. I mean, people somebody lost their life over a decision that I made at one point in my career. And I think, that you mentioned that quote by Ray Lindquist, my esteemed mentor, and I'll see if I can bring it back up. It was, you do the best you can, knowing that sooner or later something bad may happen. When it does, if you feel you did everything that at the time you thought was necessary in order to try and prevent it, then you can look at yourself in the mirror the next morning and go back to work. And I guess that's, it's, for me, it's accepting the fact that, we're all going to make mistakes in life, whether our personal lives or our, professional lives. And you have to acknowledge the fact, or hopefully you can acknowledge the fact that you did what you thought you should do to try and prevent it, but it didn't work out.
Kim, I don't know how to ask this, nicely, but I'm going to try. Well, I'll start with a story. One of the hardest moments of my life, one of the most stressful moments of my life that led towards, a traumatic stress injury was giving CPR to one of my very good friends and mentors. And in hindsight, I looked at it and I said, what a gift I got to give my friend his last breath, so to speak. And you had this experience at Fairy Meadows years ago, and you did a 3.5 meter excavation in 21 minutes.
Not me.
Well, you
Myself
as your group
and a group of other people. Yeah. We
but
were
I mean, you
fortunate
guys
to have
did,
a lot of people.
and you look at it and you say, we look at the snowpack and we look at that day and really we did most things right. And yes, there's lessons to be learned, but if you think about what Liam was just talking with Lindquist's quote, do you feel like you did the right thing? And do you give yourself credit for that? And does that help you? Because I think you deserve credit for it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Certainly, I think looking back at the events that transpired that day, that was all of the things that went right were sort of the things that led me down this path of realization that, sometimes chaos theory reigns, right? I mean, sometimes eventually something's going to go wrong. It happened to happen to me early in my career, which was difficult for me to adjust to because it felt unfair statistically. But looking back, I mean, it is easier to give myself and the rest of the rescuers that were involved credit for what happened because there's really no regret associated with it. I don't know how I would have been able to live with myself if there was associated regret. And I think that's why I find it so important now to talk about those types of things. And really, I see in the guide training system that I've been involved in, this expectation that we are either going to be able to control all aspects of the outdoor environment, or that even in a rescue scenario, we can rely on systems that were very heavily trained and ingrained in us. And like I'm understanding Dave and Liam are alluding to is at times we're sort of overrode by this stress, right? And so those systems, even if you train them time and time and time and time again, they should work subconsciously, but sometimes it's the stress that's external to that training that's really circumvents you from being able to do what you were trained to do. And I think those are those moments of unpreparedness that we really as an industry need to prepare for. And I'm really happy to see these types of conversations happening just so that we can be a little bit more aware of our blind spots in that respect.
So Lewis, you got Liam mentioning someone who died on his watch at Snowbird many years ago. I'm talking about doing CPR on a good friend. You've got Kim here talking about digging a friend out of the snow who unfortunately passed away at Fairy Meadows. All of these cause stress injuries and traumatic, mental experiences for these people, not just here on the panel, but even for the people listening, because there's people listening that know exactly who I'm talking about. So in both simple for the people listening and extreme circumstances for Kim having to do the rescue, stress can have both good and bad effects on people. And when it goes south, there's a number of psychological and pharmacological, treatments as well that can help. Can you expand from a practitioner's point of view on actual care for a stress injury like this and for someone in this situation?
I think the good news that I think all you guys are sharing is that even the most horrible, traumatic, tragic experience, the human body, as we see all the time, you guys are examples of that ability to be resilient, to still move forward. Not that we're ever saying, oh, that happened for a reason. That is a very dangerous, hurtful thing to say that we need to be careful of if you're, ever trying to help a friend, but that the mind can create meaning out of the most darkest, tragic events. And I think the short term is that it takes time, that when we give our body time to do what it is amazing at doing, which is healing, dealing with adversity, dealing with trauma, that we will get to equilibrium again. So just knowing it's possible, I can't say it enough, thanking you guys for sharing, because there's probably people today that are listening that feel so dark, so trapped that it feels impossible. And I'm sure that there are times that all of you guys were in that position. So to be a leader, to say, yes, we can get through it with the right skill set, but taking it. So I think short term is time, but yeah, that we, just like any other injury, if I was injured and you were coming to my rescue with a leg injury, let's say, like, you would know how to stabilize, care, treat that victim. There's very hopeful, predictable, supportive ways to address these traumas, these stress injuries. What we're hoping with, like, the stress continuum, which I didn't know how to share, but Laura McGladry's stuff with Responder Alliance is knowing that there's a continuum. Before, I think we thought there was, binary. I'm either good, stoked to be doing this complex rescue work, forecasting, snow science, or totally broken, totally out of it, and injured critically beyond function, and that there's a huge continuum through there. So I think even just knowing that where we're at on that continuum depends on what type of treatment is needed, and the sooner we can address that, we really mitigate the long-term stress injuries, which are going to make that person much more likely to have complex PTSD, which is much more difficult to treat if left ignored. That's big picture. Am I answering that, Grom, or do you want some like more practical?
I think you're answering it. If you don't mind, and maybe Kim and Liam can chime in on this too. I mean, there's a lot of hot topics out there that people talk about for treating trauma and stress. And we talk about psychotherapy, we talk about EMDR, we talk about psilocybin, we talk about all sorts of good drugs. Maybe talk about the basic stuff. I mean, what's wrong with just taking 3 breaths or a 20-minute nap and compare the value of that to waiting till we're in crisis and start talking about whatever it is that doctors want to give us,
Yeah, I appreciate that. Obviously there is always a time and place clinically for pharmaceutical treatment, support, medication. There is a lot of hot topics out there. That also is all online. So the psilocybin treatment that now is returning after hiatus for about 30 years due to kind of cautious political administrations, that is rooted in when our nervous system is on so high alert, that guard dog is so trained to detect threat that we can't calm down the system, then that's when we need a higher level of care. But the good news, all of us have the ability to regulate, to compensate for these big injuries, for these loads. And that's what I love, the metaphor of rapid loading and cumulative loading. Sometimes these injuries are so severe that we do need to, use every trick in the book. But the good news that no matter what, front page or pop trick is out there, I think that you're referring to, I'm a huge fan of just the very basic, the micro self-care, the 3 deep breaths, because that all is directly communicating to our nervous system that for good reason is on high alert. But once we learn to speak that language, once we learn the commands that the dog or guard dog will listen to, we can get there much more effectively with less side effects, right?
Right. I'm a big fan of the 20-minute nap. We keep a couch in our office just for that purpose, you know.
Yeah.
Every now and then you just got to sleep. So.
And that's so helpful, right? Your guard dog, your nervous system has every reason to be on high alert, really challenging avalanche layers, you know, trying to keep a whole city safe that's recreated in the back country of the Wasatch. So when our amygdala is enlarged, it is hyper focused on that. When we can let our body know, hey, we're safe enough to sleep, to take a nap, then the guard dog's like, okay, maybe I'll trust him that we're okay to calm down. It's one of the few things that will bring down that heightened arousal. And thinking about it more, worrying about it more, which is what we're good at least Americans, North Americans are good at, United States citizens are good at, is that worrying about it just trains us to realize that it is still a threat. And so I'm really glad you brought that up, because there are so many basic skills that we can all do daily that will help both keep our reservoir of resilience full. So when we are hit, we have more immunity, as well as when everything is, you know, going to hell, that we have some ways to at least stay grounded and not fully lose it.
Right. And Dean Knapp tells me on the chat box that a 30-minute nap is better, actually. So
Research says 30 minutes even better.
So, you know, so speaking about those, I'm going to kind of come off a question that is here in the chat box, but the basic coping techniques can be used in both acute stage and basic stage injuries. But, you know, Liam, you talked to me the other day about the desiderata, and I cut you off and I said, I have it tattooed on my calf. And it says, with all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. And that's there to remind me as I walk out the door into the dark every morning to look up at the sky and go, wow, what an amazing place, before I spend the next 14 hours hating it. Do you guys, Kim and Liam, do you have a little mantra like that, or a little thing that kind of grounds you and brings you back before you step back into it for the day? Does that make sense? Kim, do you have a little thing that you use that helps you make space in the first moments of your day before you step into a stressful situation?
I mean, ultimately, I always try to revisit my purpose for being out there to begin with, you know, and stay grounded in that sort of self-truth. Skiing's been a very important aspect of my life, and I try not to let all the stress or the supposed negative incidents cloud the gifts that I get from the experience of being in the mountains. So I actively try to stay connected to the environment that I'm in when I'm in it. And certainly, I mean, 3 deep breaths is a great way to sort of recenter. And as far as a mantra is concerned, I had a yoga instructor tell me one time to be where your feet are. And I thought that was really beautiful, rather than, you know, go to a different space, you know, whether it's an objective for the day, like a peak, or, you know, whether it's your state of worry or any of that, just to sort of take a moment and check in with where you're at right here, standing on your own 2 feet. And then through other therapy, I've learned to sort of assess my own personal situation of, is this a red light situation or a green light situation? Do I need more information in order to figure that out? So I just try to stay as present as possible and then use the information that's available to me to make myself as comfortable and regulated as possible so that I can rely on my trainings and all the systems that I've worked really hard on.
So and I hope I'm not gonna get in trouble for saying this, but let's be honest here. When the shit hits the fan, does that 3 deep breaths, help with you in that acute phase to calm down and bring you back to a centered place to take action? And Liam, that question could be for you as well. You've been in those moments plenty of times. I mean, what is it that we do in that moment, in the heat of battle, that brings us back to now we can take action, we can make good decisions?
Well, for me, something happened not too far into my career. Someone with whom I was very close pointed out to me that when the shit was hitting the fan and I was getting kind of wound up or starting to get flustered and to spin, and that it had a negative effect on everybody, and that it was kind of limiting what the team could do as a whole. And I think hearing that statement made me realize that I need, even though it feels like my hair is on fire, I want to try to be some source of stability for everyone else in the room. And I think that it's been a constant reminder for me. And I think, talking about therapy, I think for me, sometimes just a good cry really helps. I can think of a couple of meltdowns I had in my career, and one in particular, I remember going back into my office and shutting the door and putting my head in my hands and sobbing kind of uncontrollably for a couple of minutes, and then had a cup of coffee and ready to go again. I don't know if that's healthy or not, but yeah.
I know I've had that moment, so whether it's healthy or not, I share it with you.
I'd like to,
Go ahead, Kim.
I'd love to add to that. My dogs think you're all here with us. I'd like to add to that just that after the event that I was involved in, crying wasn't an available option for me. My body did everything it could to protect me from recognizing the danger that I had been involved in. And that was one of the very first therapies I was engaged in, is just trying to get to that space where I could cry. And the reason that I bring that up, and I think it's very important, is because I was not aware of how profoundly physiologically the stress was affecting me. I knew that I was okay, and that was strange. That's all I knew. That was the only thing that I could truly appreciate and feel. I knew that I was supposed to be more upset than I was. So at this stage of my career, when I see other people who are okay after an incident, I sometimes have, that's a red flag for me sometimes, because I know that my body did everything that it could to protect me against really getting to that space of crying. And trust me, it happened 3.5 years later. And Liam, it felt really good to cry. But it was through a lot of therapy and a lot of work to get to that point.
So
I have a question for Lewis. And I get, so are some people geared to deal with this stuff better than others? Or is it that they hide it better?
Or that they don't know?
Right. I mean, I think both are true. There are lots of people I think all first responders, all people that are showing up here are in a sense too good at white knuckling it, at getting through, even when the signals, the check engine light's on or whatever. And that's fine. We want to have moments, we want that capability to ignore some signals for when the time is right. But most of us are in that heightened state too long. And we can, those naps, those 3 deep breaths, connecting with people, even virtually like this, all helps trigger that parasympathetic nervous system. The ventral vagal system is Q. That's what we're connecting with right now. Even your dog Kim is like, hey, what's up, folks? Like, let's hang out. And I like what both you guys talked about of that deep shutdown. And so that's what we're learning more, that we all know fight or flight is the when we're pop our tops, when we really need to respond to an acute threat. And then the rest and digest is a parasympathetic nervous system, or the tend and befriend. But now there's this branch that is more common in understanding of the parasympathetic, that is the dorsal vagal response, that is that full numb shutdown. And it is a protective system for a short term, but what Kim is describing is very common with trauma. This is going to blow our fuse every time. None of us can face this without it fully shutting us down. And so knowing where we're at and just being kind, being understanding, okay, I'm still feeling numb. I'm still in that dorsal vagal shutdown, and just being okay with it, and gently at our own pace, just like you would with clients skiing, okay, maybe we're just sticking to some wiggles and some powder turns. And once there's indicators, we gradually increase what we introduce those clients to. But it can be very difficult to signal that all clear, because again, that guard dog cares about you so much, it wants to avoid that ever happening again. It takes a lot to say, okay, maybe we are going to feel something. What you were talking about, Liam, is the perfect example. With a healthy response, yeah, it's going to crush us. We are going to sob and weep with the door closed. And once that trauma has had its full life course and lived it out, which could be a matter of minutes, we have our coffee and we're back to work. When we let that process have completion, most of us, because we freeze up, the fuse trips, we're like, nope. And we just keep shutting it down, and we stay activated for days, months, years.
Thanks.
Louis, you and I talked about this a little bit, and you're hitting on it right now with being able to function at this high level for a long period of time, if we're forced to, right?
Yeah.
It's not a healthiest thing, but if we're forced to, we can do it. But how can you comment on how, acute childhood experiences or other life stressors all play into this? I mean, we're not just talking about one specific storm cycle or something. We're talking about an entire life. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, what you're mentioning is there's, very strong research of the risk factors that make an individual more likely to be affected, to be impacted more seriously, more critically with stress injuries. And yeah, and so, but the good news is that the flip side, I mean, there's some things that we're just going to be more vulnerable, exposure to alcohol in utero, for example, growing up in poverty, gender differences. There's a lot of inequality that that are going to impact us. We are all fighting for more justice, more equality, but those all make a difference environmentally baseline, if that's what you're getting at. But the good news is that on the flip side, we can carbo load. We can really improve our resilience intentionally when things are calm. So when the shit hits a fan, we're much more likely to be flexible and not break. And then you were saying the long-term chronic stress. If there's one thing that I can share that is so important, that chronic stress was meant, famine, war, intense long-term things. What our mind kind of keeps us trapped in that. And yes, maybe there is a storm cycle lasting for months. Maybe we're dealing with this injury for long-term. But what Kim is saying, am I safe in this moment before I leave my rig to get in the howling storm on the pass and do some reduction work? But in this moment, before I open that door, can I flip the parrot? Can I get back online for that moment? That's what interrupts. So this is not accurate, but it works for me. So we have this reservoir of stress chemicals. Cortisol is that one that it's there if we need it for those long-term stress halls, but we need it way less than we need. And so even if we can splash a little of that out, so it's not just boiling over like most of us are dealing with, even they're saying like email apnea is kind of a cliche, but like even, oh man, I look at the emails I have to do, rents due, most of us live in resort towns, like those stressors keep us at a fight or flight response, even though physically I am safe in this moment. That's anytime we can regulate and reset, splash a little out. It's not going to solve those problems, but it keeps us a little more likely to respond in a functional way.
Copy. Thanks, Louis.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys have heard the term decision stress. You reach a point, you're a guide, Kim, you've had, I don't know, a nightmare of a week at home. It's snowing like stink. There's a surface ore problem. You can't find anywhere good to go ski. You're stressed beyond belief. Somebody dies at another operation. You happen to know them, bums you out. Liam, you've been through this dozens of times. The avalanche cycle just won't stop. We just went through an avalanche cycle here in the Wasatch where, I was for 3 weeks praying that I didn't have a size 3 or 4 deep slab avalanche inside my ski area. We had one literally every day. And eventually you get to the point where these stress levels are so high that you kind of start wondering, am I able to make the right decision right now? Or is there a time when I need to just sit back and say no and let somebody else make the call? Liam, did you reach those points? And Kim, you as well? Have you had those moments in your career where you just finally say, I'm not at a place where I can make a solid decision because of this stress level?
If you're asking me first, something I wrote down after our last conversation was to surround yourself with competent, empathetic people who can support you and monitor you when the going gets tough. And I think that I don't know if I ever said to someone, I can't do it, take over, please. But I think people that I worked with probably saw that on numerous occasions and just stepped in. And I think I was lucky enough to have a working environment where it was okay for people to do that, for people to come up to me and say, I think this is not what we want to be doing at this particular time. Maybe we should think this over again. And, because they were such wonderful people to be able to work with, I listened to them, and I think that's, I guess that's one way that it seems I got, through those lengthy, never-ending series of, tough days.
Thanks, Liam. I remember those. How about you, Kim?
I think, at this stage in my training, I've been sheltered from a lot of those decisions because there's always someone more senior around to make those types of decisions. But I certainly observe the type of fatigue that exists over the course of the season. And I think that, having that interpersonal dynamic that Liam just described, where somebody is there to look out for, we're there to look out for each other and sort of give each other permission to have a moment of realization. I think that that is really, really important. And in my training and in my personal skiing, I try to align myself with partners that allow me that same sort of space to have a moment, or align myself with partners who I can have a really good discussion with, and I can switch from being unsure about something to really gaining the logical data that I need in order to make a good decision. To make, again, a logical decision for me, I personally need to be in a space where my emotions are regulated, and I do that through my interactions with other people. That's a different setting than if I'm single-handedly in charge of a group, of course. But I mean, I think as a collective, we should be working really hard to help each other attain regulation, rather than idolizing someone's ability to maintain that deregulated state.
Right. I mean, like Liam said, I'm really lucky to be surrounded by super empathetic people who are smart, they're capable, they're probably far better at their job than I am, and they're willing to help out when they see my stress levels going through the roof. Louis, how do you recognize when someone's stress levels are going through the roof? How do you recognize a stress injury? Not everybody has the stress continuum hanging on their office wall. So what do you look for?
Yeah, I mean, what's so hard, I mean, the idea of peer support is really building, but I'm sure you guys have all seen it. You might be able to recognize it in someone else, but the hope of this conversation is that we've got to recognize it in ourselves. And so just building that awareness, that radar, because if someone's not ready to pause, take a breather, there's nothing we can do, no matter how empathetic or supportive we are. I mean, we can offer clues. I think front loading these conversations is so helpful. So then in the moment, it's more likely to happen. But I mean, even during that really bad psychogram, we had tried to reach out, and like, as a therapist, I was like, yeah, he said, no, he's too tired, he's got to sleep. Like, that's our, that makes our day. It's so hard because as first responders, rescuers, it's others before yourself all the time. And I love what you said, Kim, that it's still happening, that idolizing someone that can maintain that dysregulated state. I love how you said that. And what we're trying to do is model, hey, this is a unnatural cycle for this long. You're great at doing your job. It's okay to be like, cool, I need like a break, or let's brainstorm on this. So I hope these discussions of just recognizing there is a stress continuum, that it is okay. It is not going to mean you're unfit for duty or that you're going to lose your job or whatever. We are all okay. We all can operate in the red, in that critically injured state, but it just comes at a tremendous cost. And so that's what we're trying to do, is be preventative. Hey, it's okay to not be okay, and model in that. Just like you do with really good assessment, scene assessment, snow level assessment. Where are we at internally? Where are my levels? What are my indicators that I'm tipping into the orange or the red?
What about if you've got a coworker who's struggling, and that coworker is starting to impact you, and you're not their superior? How do you help them? And I mean, I'm going to answer this my best guess, by simply asking, are you okay? That's the first step. And Liam and I have talked about this with a friend that he and I lost. That was a question I forgot to ask. But are there other steps you can take to reach out to somebody that really make a difference? I mean, a boss can force him to go get help, I suppose, but as just another coworker, how do you say, how are you okay? There's got to be a better word for it.
Oh, exact words. I mean, the good news is that being genuine, being empathetic, being caring, even if you mess up your words, that is going to come across. that basic connection, that ventral vagal nerve will accept that regardless of what the words are. So even if we butcher it, that's okay. The research also says, with higher risk, suicidal ideation, asking about it is not going to make it worse. Put the idea. Usually people are so thankful that someone had the courage to bring it up. So I always say, like, if your heart is in the right place, that is going to be much better than most of us that we're scared, and so we don't bring something up. But I think in those moments, there's not much we can do. And so I think that's why us creating this culture, that there's a stress continuum, that we are going to suffer injuries on our job, and that there's a pathway to get well again, that doing this preventatively, having leadership, then when we do see a coworker that is, because they are critically stress injured, it's really tough to be around someone that is in a fight or flight state, and that can wear on us. So the good news is that this prevention with conversations like this will be more normalized, less stigma for someone to respond to you, Graham, and be like, yeah, not okay.
Kim, you have something to say about that, I think.
I was just thinking about the concept of, I guess, suicidal ideation, and something that I never understood before was how anyone could get there, and I think the clarity that I've found in my own experience is that myself or anyone that I've encountered that has felt at all that way, it's almost more of a, nobody wants to do that either, but this is bad and you want to escape this, like whatever it is you're experiencing is so bad that it's not really about that even that phrase suicidal ideation is sort of misleading in my understanding of it, because that was never something that I wanted. And I have never been openly, I'd never experienced suicidal thoughts, but I did experience a pretty dark time of just not knowing how to get away from not having the answers to what I was experiencing, and so, yeah, I think, like Lewis was saying, if we can get comfortable with having these conversations, and even if it's just between the closest of friends where you can say, just be honest, I'm pretty chronic oversharer, as you can see, but I don't have necessarily issues expressing myself in ways I'm uncomfortable with, but I think it's just so hard to talk about those things for so many people, myself included. But I think we just really need to normalize having conversations that don't make any sense.
Yeah. Having been there, I can tell you it's a really hard conversation to have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard for people to answer honestly. I know I didn't until the police came to the door. So let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Liam, you and I used to sit around. We'd have Whiskey Wednesday at Sitzmark. Mike Cook, and it was a good time. And the boys at Alta are currently standing out in the cold at the Polar Bar having a beer for someone's 40th birthday. And what I'm getting at is that alcohol is kind of a pervasive part of this industry. Skiers, ski patrollers, we all like to have a beer, maybe two, maybe too many at the end of the day. And that obviously is a depressive and leads us down a bad path when we're in situations like this. So how do we move away from that? How do we find something more productive to do with our time in the evenings, short of knitting hats? Jen or Kim, you have your 4 core values, and do you spend some time thinking about that instead of thinking about the beer bottle? Or
I mean, I was trying to think of an answer to that question in my head when you're posing it, and I think we just need to revisit that joy, and when you're talking about my core values, I mean, for me, skiing is so much in alignment with the things that I stand for, which I discussed with Dave before. I mean, it's very important for me in my life to have love, to have playfulness, to have Dave, I put me on the spot. I can't even remember my own core values now. But
Love, health, freedom, and playfulness. I love them.
Health is so important to me. I mean, and that's just it. And that's why I have these discussions of mental health. That is part of the health for me. You know, skiing checks all these boxes, and freedom especially. And, you know, revisiting my ability to go out into the mountains, it's so important to me at my core to have the freedom to go and be in the mountains. So reestablishing those things after a critical incident can be very, very challenging. But ultimately, rather than relying on alcohol, I think it's probably more productive to focus on reestablishing that joy that we experience in the things that we love, and not always focusing on, I think sometimes we rob ourselves of the opportunity to be happy again when we know that we've been through a tough situation.
Right. And one of the struggles I have is it's you know, I don't have any more energy to go out and exercise anymore. So it's time to sit back and do nothing. And I'm not very good at doing nothing. So Liam, how about you? I mean, I know you would write in your journal every day and things like that. Like there must have been things to help you kind of take the top off the tea kettle.
Yeah, and I also think that when you guys would allow me to join you in the polar bar, I thought it was very therapeutic. And the same thing with having, you know, the forbidden beers in the locker room at Snowbird, which I'm sure they don't have anymore, by the way. You know, that I think that as long as it's, you know, in moderation, and I think that it helps create those bonds that are so important for us to have relationships at work where someone can say, hey, man, I'm here. Tell me what I can do to help you out, and we're going to get through this. I think that, you know, if you share all sorts of things with those people, you know, summer, winter, spring, and fall, and during work and after work, it builds a relationship that helps both, you know, helps me, you know, better help you, and vice versa. You can be more of a, you know, an aid to me when I need it. But it certainly needs to be in moderation.
Yeah, that's where we go astray, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
That's where I go astray sometimes, I'll admit it. Yeah.
I've never seen that personally.
So I want to ask kind of a hard question if I can, and there's kind of silence over here in our question box, so I'm going to go for it. And you know, we're in the avalanche business, and one unfortunate facts of the avalanche business and the business of the mountains, climbing, anything, when you go to the mountains, people die. Sometimes people die, and that's the way it goes. And that's one of the hardest things in my career. And at one point I had finally seen enough and developed full-on clinical post-traumatic stress disorder, and ended up with a gun in my mouth, and it's been a really long road to recovery. And I want to ask you guys, and I'll start with Lewis, and I guess maybe I'll start with Kim. How do you keep from getting to that point when you see that and you've finally seen enough of it? How do you stop the train from going off the tracks? Kim, you've done a really good job of it.
Thank you. I think this was around hour 2 of our conversation that lasted 3 hours, Dave, last week, that we had talked about this before. And yeah, I mean, I've been asked that question quite a lot, like, how do you keep coming back, and what allows you to keep doing your job? And I asked myself that. And for me, it's that trust in a team. And Liam just alluded to that when you're talking about having a beer. It's not about the beer. It's not about the escape. It's about the connection. And so any type of team building, really, like any sort of establishment of trust that you can have between your partners, it just allows you to, know that when you do enter into that state of not being fully regulated, that somebody else understands where you're at and can help to mitigate potential, negative impacts of that. I could go in a lot of different directions with that from there, but
No, it's okay. It's a hard question, it's not something you just have on the tip of your tongue. Lewis, what about you?
Yeah, I like what you mentioned, Kim, that when we're in such a desperate, scary situation where our brain, the suggestion, we feel so stuck, it is saying the only way out is to end it, which our brain is creative at generating ideas that I don't think we can get out on our own. I think what Kim is talking about is that connection, whether it's enjoying a couple beers, it's not about that. It's the deep connection that is what signals the all clear. And that is one of the few things that does help establish that rest and digest, the parasympathetic activation again. Also, though, is that's why, the work with the military and Laura McGladry's stuff with the stress continuum is knowing that there is a pathway. And most of the time, because of chronic stress, we're so busy, we don't realize my check engine light's been on for, 3 years until I blow a head gasket. Then I realize something's wrong. Is just checking in that there are many steps along the way that signal I'm not doing okay, I'm not well, and that there's paths to prevent further injury, that it doesn't just happen overnight. I say that to offer some hope that if we pay attention with our community, paying attention to our teammates and ourselves, that hopefully we prevent it from getting to that critically injured stress level.
Liam, you dug a lot of people out of the snow and we've lost some friends together. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, listening to Kim and Lewis makes me feel that my response is kind of like, I don't know, a little old school and maybe not being honest with myself. But I kind of accepted the fact that that's what I did, that I had chosen, and we're happy to have a job that had all those pitfalls associated with it. And I guess I just felt I needed to continue to go on because that was that was what I did. And I don't know if that's really being honest or being not healthy or avoiding the question, but I think it it kept me going back to work day after day. There was one other time in my career when I thought I needed to hang it up, and that was back in the early 80s when we had all those back-to-back 600 and 700 inch winters, and I had some trouble with there was some friction between me and one of the people I worked with, but I was talked out of it, and and very happily resumed my job, and I guess that's it. I just that's what I did, and the stress and the sadness was part of the job, but I guess I must have believed somewhere down deep inside of me that it wouldn't be bad all the time, that would there would be easy days and there would be bright sunny days, and it wouldn't, the misery and the sadness and the fear and the ultra stress wouldn't go on forever.
And I think you're right. There are sunny days, right? The storm, as you've told me before, the storm will end.
Yeah.
Eventually the sun will come out. Louis, a lot of people react in different ways to stress and stress injuries. I was just talking about how I got extremely depressed and sad. Some people get really angry. What are the different responses, emotional responses that people have, and how are some of the ways to manage those responses other than, as Liam says, the sun will come out tomorrow?
Yeah.
So,
are you wondering like how to manage like a friend, coworker, partner that is?
well, just, I mean, for on a personal level, a lot of people are, wondering about anger that comes with seeing something unfortunate, or sadness, or, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to respond. So,
Yeah.
Can you comment on that, those responses, and are they natural, which I believe they are, they're just natural responses. And how do we respond to them to bring ourselves back into a level and normal state?
Yeah, I mean, one, that these situations a lot of us aren't prepared for. The ski magazines just show powder turns all the time, whatever. And so I think a lot of us aren't prepared, even if we intellectually know it, to see, dead bodies potentially of close friends. So I think all reactions are okay. To just be kind to ourselves, be easy in that initial response time. I really like Laura McGladry and the Responder Alliance work with the peer support of the 333, checking in 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, and just giving space that we are going to be all over the map. It takes a very long time for that deep sympathetic nervous system to calm down again. And so just to be easy with ourselves, that goes to dodging those darts when you're with your friend, that anger comes out at us unintentionally or sideways, or they're not answering their phone, they're declining every time we want to reach out because the depression is so deep. Being patient, dodging that stuff, not taking it personal, and trying to know that, that we will get through this, and to that these are totally normal responses. I mean, on a big picture, that's why I do think it is helpful to gently prepare for these things, so it isn't so much of a shock, because that's when the research of new experiences where it's traumatic, that's where it really fries our system. But that we wish that would have never happened, and so we're fighting reality in every way. So it comes out in all types of emotional responses. I think that awareness of checking in, oh, I'm normally not this angry. I dropped the spoon in the kitchen and I freaked out with anger tone and stuff. That's just that gentle reminder, oh, I still might be much hotter, much more in that threat detection than I realized.
Right. Thanks, Louis. So Kim, let's play a game with that, and I'll play along with you. You really bottled it up for, you said, almost 3 years before you cried. How did you finally let others know that you were at a point where you needed help?
It's a great game.
Yeah.
This game is called You're on the Spot.
Right. No, but I mean, that is a really great question. And for me, it came to a breakdown. I was involved in a part of my guide exam where I experienced a full physical flashback to the event. Almost 4 years later, it was the first time I allowed myself into a circumstance where I was experiencing a sense of urgency on the snow. I didn't see it coming. I didn't expect that to be a trigger for me. And I've been advised that that was what led to the fact that I allowed myself to break down, was that I didn't armor up against something I couldn't see coming. And so when basically what happened was I did not perform the way that I wanted to. And then I had this realization of how important it was that I should have performed the way I wanted to. And then that spiraled into a lot of thoughts about guilt and just, I was completely overwhelmed with how important it is to do a great job to protect yourself and others on snow, because I'd seen firsthand the consequences of it. But like I said, it was due to a lot of work that led up to that moment where effectively it was a breakdown, but I think that that was the single biggest breakthrough in my recovery, was finally allowing myself to really feel what I'd been bottling up for so long.
And so, this fall I had to finally go to my coworkers and say, I am not in a good spot. What did you do when you had that realization? Who'd you go to? What'd you say?
I mean, in my circumstance, I went to the instructors of the course that I was in, and they had no idea what to do with me. They had actually offered some sort of, I don't even know how to talk about it. They had said, if anyone's experiencing anything due to things that they've been involved in the past, come to us and talk to us about what's going on for you. And I did, and they were completely unprepared to deal with just how much it was affecting me. And no shame or no shade on them, but it's one of those things where it's really obvious that a lot of people in this industry, we're starting to talk about it, but we're maybe not prepared to really have these conversations and support each other. And ultimately, at this point in my life and my experience, I would always direct someone in a critical situation like that to speak to a professional. And I would offer my ability to listen, but I mean, yeah, we have a long ways to go with respect to trauma literacy in this industry.
And you just teed that one up. Thank you very much. Yeah, there you go. So we are 10 minutes from the end of this thing. So I want to ask, I'm going to put the comment box out of mind here for a second. And I'm going to ask a question, and you just teed it up. Do you feel that allowing yourself to be vulnerable is a hindrance to your career in the avalanche industry? And is it still worth it? And how do we change it? Who wants to go first on that one?
Well, I've always considered myself kind of a vulnerable person. And for me, I think that showing a bit of vulnerability is, I think it's kind of an equalizer. People, if someone that has been in the job for 2 or 3 years, working with someone who has been in the job for 45 or 50 years, there's a big gap there. But I think if each person can see that the other person is really just a regular old human being trying to do the best they can, that it puts everybody on a little bit more level playing field, so that better interaction can take place. I always used to when I was working at Snowbird, I would say that if I was going to laugh with the patrollers, if the patrollers I worked with were going to get to see me laugh, they should also be able to see me cry. And I don't know if that, may turn some people off, but I think that it's kind of the way that's worked best for me to operate. And so I think the vulnerability thing is, not really that much of a detriment. I mean, you certainly have to be able to, take a hit and get back up again. But at the same time, I think it's good for everybody to understand that you're just a regular old human being trying to get through, trying to make it to May.
How about you, Kim? You've been pretty open here. I mean, you've shared a lot of insight with a lot of people to help them, and that's not easy to do. You've allowed people to kind of see your soul here. And do you feel like it's a hindrance to your job, or do you feel like people respect you for it and move forward with you?
Yes to both. I would say the majority of people receive it poorly, that I'm as vulnerable as I am. One thing that came up for me, Liam, is when you were speaking about emotion being an equalizer. I think that's, let me put it this way. If you and I walk into a room together, we show up as very different people. And for you to break down, it is an equalizer. But if you were that strong, poised individual and I broke down, I'm already facing a different perception of who I am. And then this vulnerability and emotion is very difficult for a lot of people to accept. And so that has been a hindrance for me. You can call it a gender issue, you can call it an age issue, you can call it a personality thing. But yeah, it's been certainly perceived as a weakness in a lot of circles. However, when it is appreciated, it's appreciated at a scale that completely overshadows all of that for me. These types of conversations are so important for me, and being involved in community building in the space of trauma has been so profoundly rewarding for me. And it's worth every bit of vulnerability in that sense. Also, I am aware of how I presented myself before a lot of this soul searching that I've been involved in. And I don't want to go back to that because I've gone through a lot of personal growth to be the person that I am now. So when people suggest to me that I be less vulnerable, it's my choice to be in this space and to be vulnerable with people and hopefully connect. So I'm not going back.
Heck yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Lewis, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Kim. Well, one, I do appreciate you talking about age, but definitely gender discrimination, especially in first responder communities. That, yeah, like our culture, there is a lot of toxicity. I will speak out as a white male privilege, like that there needs to be more equality there. Yeah, that's why I respect the leaders who can edge out a little further and be leaders in vulnerability. Liam and Dave, I think that helps so much to do that, to create that normalcy. Yeah, and Kim, your exposure is a lot more when you do it. But yeah, vulnerability, I think that is where our strength is. That is where we are being our best self, firing on all cylinders, having a full, that full perfect balance of a little of the fight or flight just to be sharp, and the rest and digest in peace. Like I'm with you guys. There's no other option for me. I actually probably shared less on this because I would have been just a crying mess, and I'm trying to at least offer and keep it somewhat professional. But yeah, that I think it's the only way of sharing, because we're all dealing with it. But sadly, for so long we've been dealing with it with closed doors, not letting people know. And that by normalizing it, it helps us get out of it and reduce some of that power, that chokehold it has on us.
Thanks a lot, Lewis. I want to thank all of you guys here. We've been at this for 90 minutes. When I stood on stage at the Utah Snow and Avalanche Workshop and started talking about this stuff in 2018, I thought I was ending my job, honestly, to speak about this openly. And the fact that it's turned into a conversation like this with professionals such as you that are willing to talk about it and help all these people that are watching and listening, I think is enormous. And I want to thank you guys so much for being vulnerable and for sharing your wisdom and for being you. Thank you. Unless anybody has any parting words, I'm going to pass this off to Gabriella, who has some stuff from the A3 to present to us regarding a resiliency project that she's been working on. Liam, your last chance for a parting word of wisdom.
Be safe.
I'll take that. G, run with it.
Thanks, Dave. And thanks to all you. That was really cool to just sit and listen to for a while. And it's like really needs to happen a lot more. So after a lot of planning, and sort of in conjunction with their strategic planning, the A3 board has voted to move forward with supporting the mental health of their members. And in doing so, they're going to launch a resilience program. And it's going to encompass a lot of what myself and a bunch of others have been working on the last few years and have similar goals. But I'm just going to kind of briefly mention two of those. The first one is going to be an online resource list of professionals and organizations that people can reach out to for support. And the second facet of that is going to be grant funding to cover mental health related costs for A3 members, as well as funding to bring in health professionals to patrol groups or guide groups. So funding will be out there for that as well. And sort of broadly, we're expecting it to be live in the spring. So that's pretty exciting to be working on.
Yeah, that's amazing. Heck yeah, wow, what a dream.
Thank you very much, G. And for everyone out there, Gabrielle's been working on this for a long time. So she deserves big accolades. And that answers a lot of questions for those of you in the chat box about resources, who we can reach out to, where to go, etc. So more to come. So thank you. Do we want to turn this back over to our organizer, Jane, real quick before we all go say goodbye for the night?
Thanks, Grom. I just want to thank all of you. That was a really, really neat conversation. I appreciate the vulnerability. I think each of you just agreeing to be the moderator is a vulnerable step. So thank you all. It was fantastic. Just to follow up, we will send out information on the resilience program in your member email. So keep your eyes peeled on that. And if you have any, I think, kind of major burning questions, I know there was a ton of questions in the chat and the question box tonight. You can email me. I will put my email in the chat. And I think Lewis is open to answering some of those questions. And Kim and Liam, I'm sure, are as well. And Grom, we can even rope you in there too, for folks who have questions that went unanswered. So thank you all so much. This has been recorded, so we'll post it and share it with you via your member email. And just, yeah, to quote Liam, be safe.